Frequency Podcast Network. Stories that matter, podcasts that resonate.
1 week from today, Canadians will be casting their ballots to choose our next government in one of the most consequential elections in generations. This race has been the shortest allowed by law, and throughout the last few weeks, President Donald Trump and his trade war have cast a shadow over the campaign. In advance of the election, we saw a wild swing in the polls as Liberals picked a new leader, sparking a rebound in support after it looked like the party was destined for defeat as we entered the new year. Polls show it is now a two-horse race, but anything can happen in politics, especially as we enter the final stretch of the campaign and parties shift their strategies. I'm Cormac Mac Sweeney, and today on The Big Story, I'm speaking with Lori Williams, political scientist at Mount Royal University, about what you can expect in the final days of Canada's 45th general election. Lori, thanks very much for joining us.
It's great to be with you, Cormac.
I'm wondering how you think parties are going to be changing the way they approach their campaigns in these final days.
Well, they'll be looking at their internal polling, the places where it's competitive, where they've got a chance of going over the top. And in those ridings, they're going to be campaigning hard. They're going to get their best door knockers out. The leaders themselves will be trying to make connections as much as they can through the media and, of course, social media. And it'll be a very concerted effort on the ground, what we call the ground game, getting the message out and getting their voters out to the polls. Now, this is an election where we are going to see a lot of very highly engaged people getting themselves to the polls, but that ground game reaches out to people and makes sure that people that are busy or maybe have transportation issues or whatever, make sure that those folks actually show up to vote.
Yeah, and let's separate the two sort of modes of the campaign for our listeners. There's the promises, the policy focus that you get from all the leaders. But at this stage of the campaign, it's not really much about the promises anymore and more about GOTV is another term people use, get out the vote, to describe the ground game.
Very much. And again, this is a campaign that's been unusually focused on leaders because of the challenges that are coming at Canada out of the United States. So that focus on the leaders and them sort of continuing to get their message out to try to motivate people independently to get out and vote on their own. But they're going to rely on that ground game, that actual machinery that reaches out to voters and makes sure that they turn up at the polls. Now, this is where the Conservatives typically have an advantage. They've got both motivated voters and a really good get out the vote campaign and machinery. But we're seeing, interestingly, in some cases, provincial NDP organizers helping get people out to vote for the Liberals. And we're just seeing a whole lot of people that are so engaged in the election that they themselves might just be motivated to get out and vote early, or certainly out on voting day, and setting the time aside to do so. I mean, I'm seeing emails from folks that have heard from their employers, as they don't in most election campaigns, that they can get time off of work to go out and vote.
And for the two front-running parties, the Liberals and the Conservatives, is there a concern there about complacency, that there's a risk their voters may think their party has it in the bag and they don't make it to the polls to cast their ballots?
I think it's less of a risk this time than I would say in most election campaigns. If people don't think their vote is going to make a difference, they're less likely to vote. If the issues don't matter as much, then they're less likely to vote. Well, people are really interested. They're engaged. They're concerned about the outcome of this election, and most of them are quite motivated to come out to vote. That said, it looks like, at least in polling up until this point, that that Liberal support is a little bit less strong, soft, as they call it sometimes. Those people may not be quite as motivated to come out and vote, and so that'll be why it's so important for them to try to match that motivation and ground game on the part of the Conservatives, especially if it's close.
So if I'm a voter who hasn't had my candidate come to my door, should I be expecting either the candidate or their staff to be door knocking in the days ahead in some of these key ridings?
There's a good chance that that will happen, especially if they've identified you as a voter that's persuadable, and they've got lots of data on all of us. So, yeah, I think you're likely to see people reaching out. Probably have already, but making sure that they're reaching out through a variety of methods: social media, telephone lines, door knocking. You name it. It's going to be coming in these late days, especially in those ridings that are really tight and competitive, and where there are two or even three-way races. There's going to be a whole lot of activity in those ridings, and the polls in many of those ridings are too close to predict who might actually win them.
What do you expect voter turnout to be? Do you anticipate a much larger turnout from Canadians?
Yeah, I think the turnout is gonna be high, both because we're seeing polling that's showing that folks are pretty engaged, but also because people tend to come out and vote. There's an incentive to come out and vote if you know that your vote can make a difference. And this is the time in election campaigns that I always remind people that votes can make a difference. There's a riding in Calgary in 2015 that was actually tied on the first ballot. So if you're in a closely competitive riding, literally every vote can make a difference. We see people winning by 5, 10, or certainly less than 100 votes in lots of ridings. So getting out and voting can really make the difference between your candidate winning and somebody else.
Let's take an overall look at this election campaign. Some are describing it as a monumental election, a critical election, an existential election, a generational election. How would you describe this election?
There's no question that it is enormously consequential, but there is a split in the electorate as to what they think is most important. Some are much more concerned about affordability and housing. Um, it's those bread and butter issues on a day-to-day basis that matter the most to them. And for some of them, this economic challenge that's coming out of the United States is part of that. And so they're looking for someone that they think can effectively deal with the challenges that they're facing, help them to manage with affordability and so forth. And then there are those who are primarily focused on Donald Trump and both the economic and the political threats that he is making against Canada. And those people are particularly motivated to come out and vote. They really care about the outcome. They care about getting a leader who can deal effectively with Donald Trump, and those people are breaking in favor of Mark Carney. The ones that are more focused on housing tend to lean more towards Pierre Poilievre.
And on the sovereignty, 51st state threats?
Yeah, I think, I mean, for the people that are concerned about these threats, that's top of mind. That's really motivating them, is engaging them. It's caused a whole, as we're seeing, it's caused a whole lot of people that have voted Green, NDP, and Bloc in the past. It's motivating them to move to the Liberals because they think that Mark Carney is the best leader to tackle the challenges that are coming out of the United States. And some of them are strongly enough motivated in terms of that issue and that leader that they are motivated to vote in order to prevent Pierre Poilievre from becoming the leader. So it's, the motivations, both positive and negative, are pretty strong in this election.
More on the big story with Lori Williams, political scientist at Mount Royal University, in just a moment. Let's now take a look at the messaging from the leaders. I mean, unsurprisingly, the Liberals have been focused very much on President Donald Trump and the trade war. The Conservatives, while also focused on that, keep trying to bring the conversation back to some of their more foundational issues that they're more comfortable with. Things like crime and punishment, housing, the spending of taxpayer dollars. But the NDP, and to an extent the Bloc Québécois as well, have changed their messaging through this campaign as the polls began to significantly shift. The NDP now saying, send us into the House of Commons to hold the government to account rather than talking about forming government. Do you think this shift in messaging for the NDP, let's say, is going to work when the polls show this is such a dominant two-horse race?
Well, the reason it's a dominant two-horse race is because people recognize that neither the Bloc nor the NDP can form government, and they're really concerned about who does form government. And again, some people are motivated positively because they think that their leader is the best one to form government and to deal with the international challenges that Canada is facing. Some of them are motivated, and this is where the Liberals have picked up support. They're motivated by people that are strongly supportive of Mark Carney, but also concerned that Pierre Poilievre is whether it be too much like Trump, not focused enough on the concerns of employment and the economy that they want to see the government focused on, and they're motivated to leave their traditional party in favor of the Liberals because they do see this as a significant threat, and they see, at least in this election, they see Mark Carney as the best person to both stop Donald Trump and whatever they see as echoing Donald Trump in Pierre Poilievre.
Do you think in these final days we're going to see a shift in the polls, though? Do you think, the NDP or Bloc could gain some ground again? Or has everyone just sort of made up their minds already?
That's difficult to know. Obviously, things can break in the final days of campaign. And we've actually seen in some cases, I'm thinking of the 2015 or even the 2012 elections here in Alberta, where pollsters stopped their polling just over the weekend before the election, and a lot of people made up their minds at the last minute, and the polls were wrong. So it is possible, really, literally, at the very last minute, for people to change their minds. It's possible that a new issue takes on prominence in an election campaign, that a leader makes a gaffe or a particularly impactful statement or promise that connects with voters. All of those things can start to shift things really in the closing days of a campaign. So far in this campaign, the polling's been remarkably stable. Lead that the Conservatives had at the beginning of the year dwindled before the election was called, and that trend has just continued. It's a bit remarkable that it doesn't seem to matter what the issues or the news of the day happen to be. The polling numbers are remarkably stubborn.
Since you brought this up, have you ever seen the polling swings that we've seen in 2025 in such a short amount of time? I mean, we're not even out of April yet, and it's been a massive switch in support.
Yeah, I mean, you take the numbers. The Conservatives were up about 25 at the beginning of the year, and now the Liberals are up about 10. I mean, that's potentially a 35-point swing. And no, I've never seen it, certainly not in this shorter time period, but there are three dramatic factors that have made a difference. The campaign was completely focused on anger against Justin Trudeau. And so when Justin Trudeau resigned, new possibilities emerged. Mark Carney ran for, became the leader of the Liberal Party, prime minister, with a very impressive international economic record, a record of building networks and looking like he had both the understanding and the connections to more effectively deal with the challenges coming out of the United States. But frankly, the biggest factor of all is first Donald Trump's election and the enormous rapidity with which he has issued executive orders and statements that have threatened Canada's economy and even its sovereignty over the last couple of months. And that combination has just completely shifted the focus. People are looking much more on the future rather than a referendum on the past. They're looking for who can best manage the challenges we're facing. We've seen a surge in Canadian unity, where people are willing to work together to try to build a Canadian economy and a sense of camaraderie that can be the foundation for building a better Canada. And it's just completely changed the perspective of a significant number of voters.
One theme of this election campaign has been a focus on jobs, but there are also some political jobs that might be in question through the results of this election. Do you think because of shifts that we've seen in polling, the handling of campaigns, the amount of time some of these party leaders have been in their positions, do you expect some party leaders to have their jobs on the line with the results if they can't pull off what their parties consider a victory?
Don't think there's any question that leadership is going to be a question. I think it's the toughest question for Jagmeet Singh. Even though he's run a very energetic campaign, he's well liked. Lots of the folks who voted for him in the past would vote for him this time, were it not for everything that's coming at us out of the United States. And essentially, the primary issues of the day have caused a whole lot of voters to defect from the NDP to the Liberals, not in a permanent sense, not in a long-term sense. I don't think this necessarily portends what's going to happen to the NDP party in the distant future, but certainly for the next few years, the focus is on managing the Trump administration and the unpredictability of what might be coming out of that administration, and that's led people to lend their votes to the Liberals for the time being. So I think Jagmeet Singh's leadership might be in question, possibly. Mr. Blanchet's leadership could be in question. And even though Pierre Poilievre has really strong support, I mean, the numbers that he's getting right now would have been enough for majority government had there not been this coalition of voters at the center left. He would have enough support to win an election, but because the Bloc and the NDP voters are flocking to Mark Carney, it's looking much more difficult for Pierre Poilievre. If Pierre Poilievre loses this election, and as Corey Tenayk said, blows a 25-point lead, I think there will be lots of questions about whether he can lead the Conservatives effectively into the next election.
All right. Is there anything else that you want to touch on that I may have missed?
Yeah, one more thing, and that is whatever happens on April 28th, there's a lot of work to be done starting immediately. And it's really going to challenge whoever the next prime minister is. It's going to challenge Canadians. And I think it's going to be very difficult to sustain the kind of support that any leader has on election day going into the challenges that are facing us.
All right, Lori, thank you so much. I really appreciate your thoughts on all of this.
My pleasure, Cormac, always.
That was Lori Williams, political scientist at Mount Royal University, speaking with me about what we can expect in the final days of Canada's 45th general election. I'm Cormac Mac Sweeney, and that was The Big Story. You can send us your feedback on this episode or any other episode by emailing us at hello@thebigstorypodcast.ca or leaving a voicemail at 416-935-5935. You can find us on the Seeker app or on all your favorite podcast players. Please rate, review, follow, and share. Thanks for listening.